Hello and welcome to the Long Ways podcast. I'm Devin Windlespeck.
And I'm Michael Windlespeck.
We take you each episode to one of the great long trails of the world. Now, the latest episode we were going to have about the worst day on the trail, and that one's still coming. But we recently actually got back from Portugal, and we decided to do a special episode on the Rota Vicentina in Portugal.
An amazing trail.
Yep, absolutely. One of the best ones we've ever done in terms of scenery, in terms of pushing yourself, difficulty, also high up there in terms of heat. But we wanted to do something special because we just got back from this trail. We really wanted to, while this was still fresh, talk about this trail, what it was like to hike it, the preparations, all that kind of stuff. So consider this a special episode, and we'll just launch into it. Dad, can you tell us what the Rota Vicentina is? Just give us a rundown of the trail.
It is a really interesting trail because it actually encompasses two different trails, which kind of like intertwine with each other, which becomes part of the story, as I'm sure as we move through this. Basically, it is a trail that runs along the western coast of Portugal, and it starts south of Lisbon. The actual start point, there's a lot of debate about it, but we started the more traditional spot. And there's a section of it called the Fisherman's Trail, which basically takes you along the coast, and that lasts
about
3 to 4 days, I think. Yeah. And then you move back onto the Rota, and it's more of an inland trail, which brings you periodically back to these small towns and communities along the coast. But you're hiking more along the interior agricultural area of
not dissimilar to what you would get on something like the Camino.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think for us, the first 4 days on the Fisherman's Trail, 5 for me, because we'll talk about that, were some of the best scenery I've ever experienced on a hike. Just corner after corner, you're beside these massive cliffs going down into the ocean, just kind of like the wild Atlantic all around you, and just like these pure untouched beaches, tiny little fishing villages. And you're just you're by the sea, with a couple of exceptions, pretty much the entire time.
It was. I mean, one of the things I was surprised about, coming in and having, travel issues and, meeting up with you and that first day is that probably about every, couple of kilometers, you turn the corner and there would be this vista that just, blew your mind. And you're like, it can never get better than this. And you'd walk 2.5 kilometers down and you turn a corner like, yeah, it's far better than that.
Exactly.
You just were inundated by that rough coast.
Yeah. I can't think of like a single view that was my favorite, just because every view was just amazing. And we were coming into kind of the tail end of their wildflower season. So when you're hiking along these cliffs, it's just covered in yellow and pink wildflowers everywhere, which really kind of brought out like this contrast with like this deep blue going to like light blue towards the coast, a little bit of green mixed in their sea. It's really like, it's a pretty aggressive sea. It's like going up against the rocks, and it's not like this gentle Mediterranean, like it's the Atlantic, it's an ocean that you're hiking beside. So you have like kind of like this juxtaposition between like these really peaceful meadows you're hiking around, and then just to your right or left, this like really huge churning sea. I actually hiked an extra day of this trail because Dad and Eric were, let's say, they were prevented from the first day. Do we want to talk about that a little bit?
We were playing the American Airlines game, which I think an important thing about these types of trips is that you have to be prepared that nothing is going to go right for the travel in or out of the country. Or where you're going. And once you do that, I think you set yourself at kind of a piece. It was rough. Our flights were canceled. We had to move around. We weren't in the same spot as you were.
Yep.
We had to make arrangements. But thanks to people like Max Adventures, the people who are been basically our coordinators for the past, all of these, and definitely a shout out to Max. Everything runs smoothly once you're on the trail and you feel all that stress leave. But it was stressful, and we did not actually unfortunately for me, we did not make the toughest part of the trail, which I'm terribly disappointed in, just to let you know. So,
well, I will say that first day. So I come in the day before in Lisbon. very similar. Jet lagged, you come in, find your way to the Lisbon bus station, taking the bus south, falling asleep on the bus because you're jet lagged. And I remember pretty much just arriving in Porto Covo and just getting a text like, we're not going to make it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so like the next morning, it was actually kind of nice though for me. Like I woke up and it's just, over the past year since Ireland, there's been a lot of changes for me. I've moved to Boston. I started a new job in journalism. And it's nice to have that first morning when you wake up and it's just that feeling of, all right, I'm going to get up. I'm going to put on my hiking boots and put on my hiking poles and just walk. There's no jobs. Yep. There's no stress. There's just the trail. Now, what I forgot to do is put on sunscreen the first day because I didn't have any because it was all with Dad.
True. Yeah,
so for the rest of the trip,
about that.
the rest of the trip, I was so burned the entire time until like the very end. Just like my arms and the back of my neck, especially, it was pretty tough.
It was tough. Yep.
Which I think brings us to, like, compared to the Dingle Way or especially the West Highland Way, I don't think there was anything particularly challenging about the elevation or anything. It was just the elements. You want to talk a little bit more on that, Dad? Yeah,
I do. In the big scheme of things, I think I was probably less prepared for this trail than others, but the heat was brutal. And I think, learning back and talking to people, kind of like our Ireland trip, they're like, it's never been this hot in Ireland. Well, it had not been this hot in Portugal in 20 years. So I don't know if maybe you can use us as a barometer of, where it's going to be hot at from here on out.
Yeah, climate change for sure.
It wasn't the elevation changes. One of the big problems we had with the heat was the fact that in many ways, especially, the heat was two different ways. In the beginning part of the trail along the Fisherman's, we were often climbing up basically sand dunes.
Yeah,
and you imagine these sand dunes are baking in the hot sun. You have no place to hide. There's no trees, right?
Yeah.
And the heat just started to permeate through your feet, right? In the second part of the trail, when we were more on the Rota, heading down inside the country, it was more of a relentless heat on top of you, not coming up from the trail. And it took some adjusting in both directions to get used to it. But it wasn't an elevation trip. There were a couple of days it had some elevation changes, but that was usually just moving in and out of these ravines to different areas. Often we had to drop down into the town, and then come back up the next day, which nothing was difficult. It was not Mont Blanc level, or even West Highland Way towards the Devil's Staircase, which everybody said would be easy, but was absolutely, I don't know what they're talking about. So I think that the heat was something that was challenging us, and one of the big things about that, of course, was kind of an inaccessibility to water on this one. Okay,
for sure.
We had to be much more conscious of our water supplies, and we were very good about this.
Yeah, we brought a lot more because I think usually on the other trails I bring about 3 liters on me. We were regularly bringing at least 4 a day,
and electrolytes.
And
electrolytes. The first time we actually did the electrolyte. And once again, we're, as a disclaimer to everybody who's out there listening to our episodes, if you think we're professional hikers, we're professional hikers because we survived our own stupidity sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And we've gotten better over time.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's hope for everybody. But I think the electrolyte tablets were an amazing help. I often felt very regenerated with just having, a couple 100 milliliters of water and with electrolyte tablet in it. But it was a challenge. But, the funny thing, Devin, is the fact that it was a challenge, and you get absorbed by the heat and you feel uncomfortable. And then you turn the corner and you're looking down at these unbelievable rock formations.
Yeah.
I've been, along the New England coast many, many times and lived in Maine, and I love that coastal thing. This was far more impressive in my mind than anything I ever saw in Maine. It was great.
Well, let's talk about, I'm sure we'll talk about more of like some of our favorite sections of this trail, but for this one, this special episode, what are some just overall highlights and lowlights of the trail?
For me, one of the highlights was, we set out on this trail, and Eric and I and you had discussed earlier that we wanted to make this part of this trail of investigation. We've been doing these trails, we want to be able to write stories on them. And so, one of the things you'll probably see on our website and, other places is our discovery of the storks.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been walking along the coast, and the storks of Portugal are absolutely amazing creatures. And to see them living in these environments, to photograph them, and then to go back to the room at night and try to figure out why they were there, which is an incredible story, which we're not going to get into today. It just made you the next day want to get up and go find more storks or go find another story.
And just like paint a picture of this. These are these beautiful, formerly endangered. I think they were covering a little bit. Animals that they would literally perch like these massive nests on the tops of like these jutting rock spires in like the middle of the ocean, like chimneys. Far away from anything.
They kept calling them chimneys, right?
Yeah. So like the most like rugged, inaccessible rocks would have like 3 or 4 stork nests on them, and we were lucky enough to be there also right after mating season, so they had all the younglings there as well.
And the important thing to recognize that these storks are not water birds; they're not fishermen. But it was so inspirational to see them. That was the high point for me, was walking along the Fisherman, definitely along the Fisherman Trail, and then also stopping at these fun little cafes. Okay, overlooking. We were sweating to death. Okay, and they came over and what do you guys want? We want 5 liters of water. Okay?
Exactly, not even beer.
And before we leave, we want 5 liters more. So just okay.
I think for me, a highlight was all the little towns we went through. And for me, this has always been some of the highlights of the trip for me. I'm one of those people. I like culture. I love Europe, but I love like seeing these little towns that you don't get to see if you're traveling to Europe and you're just seeing the big cities. And an opportunity these trails do, whether it's Ireland or Scotland or Mont Blanc, is that you really get to see the countryside a lot more. And a lot of these little towns, they'll have like a little bit of tourist feel to them, and it really depends on the trail. But for the most part, the only other foreigners are hikers. So these towns, they know that there's hikers coming through, but they're not inundated with tourists. I wrote down a few of my my favorites. Porto Covo at the beginning, which Dad didn't get to see, which was just this very classic, like blue and white painted houses. And all the houses were like very much structurally similar. They were white. They were built to hold, out heat, kind of stocky, but just beautiful architecture. Beautiful little town that had like that quintessential Portuguese feel to me, which I really liked. Again, we're going to butcher a lot of Portuguese today, but Zambueiro do Mar, that was the one that was really close to the sea, remember? Had that Sunset Cafe, which we didn't actually manage to get to. And then this one called Dace, I forget, I don't know how to actually pronounce that, which was just like this old, felt like almost like this medieval town that like withstood the test of time. Like it was built up on a hill, almost like a Midas turrets, built up on top of the hill. And at the very top was this beautiful windmill. And we actually spent a 0 day there. Just each of these towns each one was different. There's Algarve, which had this ancient, actually Moorish castle from like the 1100s built above it. So each of these towns was different. Each had like something different to give. And I've always enjoyed that. And this time is especially good, especially because I think this is the best food we've ever had on a trail.
Oh, yes. I mean, so, everything from the fresh fish was simply amazing. And we're going to definitely post some pictures of this up on our upcoming, Instagram channels and everything like that. But the fresh fish everywhere we were at, if we had a chance for fresh fish, it was simply amazing.
When they have sea bass, octopus was very big.
Lots of breams, which had many different names. We had to learn a little bit about them. But the one thing we did realize was the fact that, in every place we were at, once you'd ask the waiter, which one of them you'd want to have. And I was never disappointed in the food, of what we had. So unlike other trails where you could order stuff from the places where you were at for lunches and stuff, we found that the easiest thing, because we had these really nice breakfasts, that's the advantage of doing the Max Adventures, the B&B version of this. But there were these basically little mercados, a spider. And if you walked in there, you could get just some crackers and some cheese, and more importantly, the apples, which I think sustained us more than anything. And, if you had a good breakfast, none of the trail days were terribly long. Okay, they could be done in.
The last one was long.
The last one was long, but
Yeah.
the longest was really like 7 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you could usually do them in, 5 hours to 6 hours of hiking. The last one was long, and we can talk about that some other day. But yeah, and I think that the people there were amazing, and you just go in and get some cheese and some crackers and some apples, and we just hike and we stop and have a little snack, and it was great.
But like, let's switch to the lowlights. Like, what was the most difficult part of the trail for you, Dad?
I think one of the most there was the most difficult and there was the most challenging. I think the most difficult day was really, we had a couple of days where, especially on the last day, where we were going to be hiking through, what was basically scrub habitat. There was nothing interesting to see.
Well, we were spoiled also by the first couple of days.
Exactly. And it was just moving in and out of these hill countries and stuff like that in the high heat. I think that was probably the most difficult day of the trip. But interestingly for me, and this is my perspective on it. So in all of our other trips, I have not made the last segment for various reasons. Usually that I was out of shape. Or for 2 years, I was dealing with only having a 0 or 1 functioning knee.
Exactly. That was mostly it. Yeah.
It was, and it was just hard, and I wasn't ready for the 15 and 16 milers.
Yeah.
And so I remember getting up the morning of the last day. And you and Eric, saying, we have a number of ways we can get out of this. And I remember saying, I don't want an exit ramp.
Yeah.
If I step off foot on the trail, I'm walking off the trail. Yeah. And I think that's the mindset you have to take with this for each segment. You can always look, and probably from a safety precaution, obviously you need to know where you can get out, but you can't give yourself that option. And we didn't. And, the two of you are amazing hiking partners, but it was a mindset thing, and it made the difficulty. If I go back to what I thought was the most difficult, I think it was some of those days on the sand dunes, when you're tired and the last, we're a half mile away, and you can't get up the sand dune because it's like 200 degrees.
Yeah.
That was rough. How about you?
The low light, I think that's the thing. I think the 3 days towards the end wouldn't have felt so disappointing is the wrong word, but uneventful compared to the other ones, because you were hiking through some beautiful farmland. You were hiking through some of it was kind of scrubland, especially at the tops. But it really kind of felt like we hit this adrenaline high for the first 4 days, and then we're almost let down by the final 3. And that's partly on us. We actually didn't make it all the way to the end of the trail based on scheduling. We ended 2 days later. So maybe if it had been a little bit of a, 3 days where it's not much is happening and then ending on a much higher note at the very end in Sagres, that could have been a little bit different. I do remember especially the last day or two, I was really feeling like I was hiking more to finish it than anything. And that's okay. Yeah. There's a certain kind of mental and physical challenge that comes with that. And sometimes you do the trail for the challenge. But I think that my lowlights are probably those last 2 days when I was just kind of ready to end, but not willing to say I'm not going to, finish the trail.
Every trail has those days.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're saying to yourself, all I have to do is get to the end of this day.
Yeah.
And the nice thing was that every single one of those days, they had amazing accommodations, which are just
and again, wonderful. The towns were wonderful in each place,
and the hosts were always wonderful. You're not always staying in high-end places. If you're looking for a 4-star hotel, then you don't want to be on the long trails. That's not happening. But the people who run it are always help friendly. They're hiker friendly. They'll help you out. Even when we stayed in little towns where there wasn't much going on, they would tell us, go here, go there. Yeah. Right. And this is what you want to see. And it made all the difference,
Yeah, I agree. Well, I actually, for people who want to hike this trail specifically, not a trail, but this trail specifically, I don't think it's a trail that, a lot of Americans know Mont Blanc. They know the West Highland Way even. We saw very few Americans in this trail. Lots of Germans, some Portuguese, some French. So I think it's a lot better known in Europe than it is in the States. But I think we really would encourage people to hike this trail. But what should people know for the trail? What should they prepare for it?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is to prepare to give yourself the experience to the chance to experience the culture of Portugal.
Yeah.
So we built a down day in the middle, which was amazing because we actually
always build a down day.
That down day we decided to hike to a beach, which as we kept hiking, it felt as if it kept getting further away. I don't know why. Okay, because we were tired of hiking. I remember yelling at everybody, "This is a down day. I shouldn't be walking."
Yeah, but we still got a lot of steps in that day.
Once you got to the beach that day, you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is beautiful." But build a down day, okay? That gives you a chance to recuperate and rest, okay, and not have a destination, but also build a day on the end. We built an extra day in Lisbon, which I'm glad we did because we had a chance to go down into Lisbon. The city is a beautiful city, and so we're talking about the long ways, but sometimes your entry and exit cities are simply amazing areas.
Yeah.
How do you prepare? It really often these things are not as physical as you think they are. They're mental. And we keep coming back to this. I know we've said this in many of our other podcasts, but they are mental challenges of, really what you're doing is you're going for a walk. Okay. And you can't be thinking about, how many miles have we done, where we're at. You have to mentally do that. And so prepare yourself by going out for walks, and not asking yourself where you're going and go wander.
Yeah.
And come and give yourself a time. I'm going to go wander for an hour. And when you get on the trail, you can say to yourself, well, when I wandered for an hour when I was in Boone, North Carolina, I walked 2.5 miles. Today we're walking 15. Okay, well, I can do that 5 times. I mean, okay, and I don't know. It's my mindset of how to prepare. Obviously, good gear, and we will definitely post some things about what good gear is going to be because bad gear is bad times.
Yeah,
be prepared for blisters, sunburn, dehydration, but
I think especially with the elements on this trail, I think you could do a couple of our trails without like the best gear in the world and you'd be okay. You may be a little bit uncomfortable at times, but you'd be fine. This one, it's not like you need like absolute top quality hiking gear, but this is one of the ones where I think just the elemental exposure, you really need, stuff that, is light fitting, but can kind of block you from the sun. You really need really breathable clothes. You really need
exactly. Yep.
You need one of the dromedaries or camelbacks that you can drink while you're hiking.
I think we were well prepared for this one. I think the heat was a challenge, but it was never an obstacle.
Mm-mm. The other thing I would recommend, and I would recommend this with any hike. I mean, if you're going to Ireland and England, that's one thing, but learn a little bit of the language coming in. Hello, thank you, please, all those little things. It helps a lot, I think, to introduce yourself as a guest to somewhere. To say, I am hiking through your towns. I don't speak the language, and people don't expect you to speak fluent Portuguese. And they'll switch to English right away. But there's a certain amount of respect. This is your country. This is your home.
Yes.
I am trying to say I acknowledge that by opening up with a hola and ending with a obrigado.
Yep.
With thank you. And a couple other ones. You don't have to have a full repertoire. Eventually, you'll pick up like what different things on a menu say. Dad actually helped with that a little bit because he lived in the Azores and there was a little bit of similarities to.
Well, it was more of a fun thing. I would look at what we want in the English version and I'd order off the Portuguese.
Exactly.
Okay, because I knew I was like, okay, we want this, and these are the words. I mean, it was usually humorous.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they would respond back. So you're looking for is this. I'm like, I just tried the language, but I think especially in the small towns.
And we never ran into a problem with people not speaking English, but it is, and I think like anytime you do a hike like this, similar and Mont Blanc, I knew French, so being able to introduce yourself in French just helps a lot. Learn those words, learn the basics of the language. You don't need to communicate, but it helps to be a part and experience the culture.
I think in a future episode, we can do something on the people of the trail. Portugal was and is one of the most impressive. Keep thinking, we've done Mont Blanc, we've done, West Highland, we've done Dingle, and every single one of those have just awed me. And this one awed me even more. And I don't know if it's because maybe I'm more aware, and more in the moment. Okay. Rather than just, I'm going to go hike this trail. And, I've accomplished 38% today or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been good.
On that note, and you kind of already said this, like, what did this trail compare to all the other trails? When we look back on all the trails we've hiked, what will you remember most, and what does this trail mean to you?
To me, what I remember most was, of course, hiking with you and Eric. Mm-hmm. Okay. We've done these things. We have a unique way of hiking together. Sometimes we don't hike together, but whatever. Okay. But, we have a good time with it. We have, we enjoy the same things. For me, however, it was this idea of setting it, I had over the past couple of years, over COVID, had 2 knees replaced. Okay. And worked, my big goal through both those knee replacements was I wanted to be able to do the long hike. And that made me sit in bed and wake up in the middle of the night and do knee exercises and do everything I needed because it was my goal. And accomplishing that goal was mentally one of the most important things. I mean, I wasn't going to break any land speed records for that. But we made some good time. Okay. And we did a good time. So for me, it was the fact that I set myself out for a challenge and I knew that physically I had to recover from where I was, and I did it. Okay. And I think that whenever you go onto one of these trails, you have to ask yourself what your goal is. Is it to experience a culture? Perfect. Is it to complete 115 miles? Perfect. Is it to, whatever you want, and then be happy when you do that?
I think for me, I realized this, I think on that first day in Porto Covo and hiking the day after. This is the first time where these trails to me have not just become something we do, but have been like, this is our 4th trail already. And this is, I think, the first one where I was like, this is a part of who I am. This is what I do. I love hiking these trails. I love being a person who spends their vacation time, going out and experiencing these things I would never experience otherwise. And, like we said in our first episode, it kind of started on accident that this became part of who we are as people, as hikers and people who hike long ways and long trails and experience Portugal and Ireland and Scotland. So I think that's what this trail means to me. It became not just a trail I hiked, but one of these memories that I'm going to cherish for a long time, and also something that's becoming more and more of a part of who I am as a person. And I think that was really valuable for me to realize on this trail. And I think it's why this trail in particular, I think is going to be very special to me, because it's when I came to that realization.
Yeah, I agree. It was an amazing trail. I cannot wait for next year. And we have no idea what we're doing next year, but we
got a couple options. So
give a couple options.
We'll be continuing. I think our next episode is still the worst day on the trail. So which I still think the Rota Vicentina had some tough days, but I still think that one day in Ireland takes the cake.
I don't think we're even close to beating the one day in Ireland.
No.
I think there are a few things that can be worse and in some ways more rewarding. It'll be funny.
Yes.
It'll be funny. Okay. It's going to be lots of fun. Yep.
So anyways, thank you for listening to this special episode. Once again, I'm Devin Windelsbeck.
And I'm Mike Windelsbeck.
This is the Long Ways Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we can't wait to have you the next episode.